What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to The Crazy One. Now, this is the channel where we talk about design, leadership, creativity, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And if you like the content, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button and hit that little bell so you get the latest videos whenever those come out. Now, on this show, I've always sort of prided myself on not shying away from the tough subjects. And that's what I want to talk about today, is I want to talk about getting laid off, getting furloughed, losing your job. And the chances are pretty good if you're watching this video, one of those has probably happened. Now, I think the problem is not many people actually ever talk about this. I remember even whenever Debbie Millman was interviewing me for the Design Matters podcast, she seemed to be shocked that I was willing to admit that I've been laid off. And I haven't been just laid off once, I've been laid off twice. As recently as actually 5 years ago. And just to sort of prove that it can happen to anybody, I may have the unique distinction of being one of the few people, one of the few outsiders that has actually been laid off on Apple's campus. I was having lunch at One Infinite Loop whenever my boss called me and said, oh, you know what, our board of directors, who are a bunch of rich guys who decided they want to get richer. Yeah, well, they pushed out the CEO and you've been laid off too. I got laid off with my work running globally in an Apple commercial. You could find it in Apple stores. I just done one of the two big apps for the launch, and none of that mattered. And just sort of this business reality inflicted itself on me. I lost that body of work. I lost my team. I lost my sense of stability and a whole lot more. And so I think that's what I want to talk about today, is I want to talk about what are you going through, right? I think not just from a practical standpoint, because I think we're going to get to that. But more importantly, I want to talk about it from an emotional standpoint, because this is going to be an emotional time. This is a tough time. You lose a lot of self-respect. You lose a lot of stability. You can even feel like you're losing some of your sanity. And so I want to sort of talk about what are some of the things you can do on the emotional and the practical side that can help out with some of that stuff. I want to be able to share a resource that I think might be really good with what it is you're going through. And the last thing is, well, I want to talk about why I think this actually could be a good thing. Not right now, not today, right? Like I'm not saying like, yeah, you got laid off or furloughed. That's not the case. But I can tell you the first time it happened to me, it changed my career. And I never went back from there. And I took something that was so frustrating and so disorienting and made it into one of the biggest driving forces of my career. So that's what I want to talk about today. Share some of that stuff. So, hey, stay tuned. Where I think we're going to hopefully be able to find you some help, get you some good insights. Let's get into it. Okay, well, you got laid off. You got furloughed, something happened, right? And I think there's not an easy way to say, yay, this is great, yay, this is going to be easy, because it's not. But what I want to do is, like I said, I want to talk about two different things. I want to talk about the emotional side of this, and I want to talk about the practical side. But let's start with the emotional side, because I think this is the one area I never hear people talk about. This is the one place where, again, I think this is just as big as any life event. This is just as big as getting married, divorced, having a kid, buying a house, buying a car, leaving home, going to school. There are these moments where all of a sudden everything changes. And this is one of them. And like any of those sort of changes, because change in all of its forms, even good, is emotional. It's stressful. And this is one of those times that it's often not a good change, or at least not good in the short term. But the first thing that I want you to do is just take a deep breath. It is hard. It is emotional. It is disorienting. But I think, the thing that we're going to want to do here is, how do we get your head right? How do we get you back in the fight and in a good spot to be able to get to the place, to get to whatever that next thing is going to be? Because for me, too often what I did was I just went rushing in. I panicked. I did all sorts of stuff. I wasn't ready. I didn't have my head right. I wasn't in a good place to be able to move on to that next thing, because in many cases, this is just like a relationship. And if you've ever been dumped, not being the dumper, but the dumpee, you know how that is whenever just someone else's reality sort of gets inflicted upon you and you have to deal with it. And I think it's that sort of like emotional disorientation is why I want you to just take a deep breath. But then it's also understanding that this is going to be emotional. And I think too many people try to hide it, try to fight it, say, oh no, I'm fine, it's not a big deal. Like, right, they put on the mask and they put on the happy face. I mean, look, I'm not saying go have an emotional breakdown in the middle of the street, but I'm also saying, like, look, I think honesty is going to be a really important part of this. And this is going to hurt. It is going to influence your confidence, your self-worth, and very practical things like inflict a lot of stress about how do you pay your bills, where are you going, the plans that you had are suddenly up in the air. A lot's changed. And like I said, I think too many people want to shield themselves from it. They just want to say that everything's okay. And like if I say it enough times, it's going to be true. And look, it's going to be okay. And we're going to get through this. But the thing is that like I said, I think the more emotionally honest you are with yourself and with other people, the better this is going to be. But a lot of this advice that I want to do, like I said, is about getting your head right. Because whenever I said before about like this is sort of when you get dumped, I for some reason, at least for me, that was always the analogy that I went back to. Because in the same way that whenever you're just coming out of a relationship, it's easy to sort of go for the rebound and just be able to go for what's easy. And again, I think you can do that from a career standpoint too. Just take the next thing that comes along because it's there. Not a good fit, not going to last. But the problem is usually a job is a little bit harder to get rid of than a new boyfriend, girlfriend, pet, like whatever that is, right? So because again, I think there's more of a commitment to those sort of things. But that's why for me, this is about how do we get you in a place where you're ready to go back in, to have that relationship with a new team, with a new company, to do those sort of things. And that, again, this is not going to be easy, but how do we not let it just dominate what it is you're going through? And the first thing that I want you to do, because I think this was a trap that I fell into, and this is going to be really easy to say and really hard to do, is to not take this personally. Because having been through this twice, both of the times, it was really easy to feel like, why have I been victimized? Why did this happen to me? What did I do wrong? Like all those sort of things. But the reality is that when you've been laid off or furloughed, somebody made a business decision, right? To protect the business, to protect the investors, basically to protect all of like the money over people. And that, so what's going to happen is that, while it is a business decision and they sort of will view you as a resource, it doesn't feel that unemotional. It feels incredibly personal. It feels like, what did I do wrong? What could I have done better? And so I just want to remind you that, again, in this instance, this wasn't about what you did wrong. This was a business decision that, again, happened to you. I will say, though, for me, it is something I've always kept in the back of my mind. Even the best jobs, even the best teams, was sort of reminding myself that at any moment, this sort of business reality can inflict itself back upon the situation. And no matter how much I love my team, no matter how good of a work I have done, I can still be disposable, i.e., the Apple Watch story, where, again, I don't know what else I could have done, what else I could have given the company, and all of that still wasn't enough whenever a business decision got made. So, again, I think that there are those things where it's just don't take it personally. But then I think the other part of this is as well, understand your value. Understand what you bring to the table in this. And what I don't want you to do is to play the victim. Because I did this, especially after this sort of Starwood Apple Watch stuff, because that was a case where then all of a sudden I wanted an explanation. I wanted this to make sense. I wanted to know what I did wrong. This wasn't right. This shouldn't have happened to me. And I went out on social media and I did a lot of other things to sort of express that feeling. And I was very lucky to have a group of friends who sort of called me on it. And they're like, look, what the hell are you doing? Why are you feeling sorry for yourself? It didn't diminish your accomplishments. It didn't diminish your work. It didn't diminish all the great things that you did. It's just a moment where that wasn't respected and handled the way it should have been. And again, it's one of these things where I want you to know that the work you did was still good enough. And like I said, this was a business decision that sort of came crashing into the situation, but it didn't diminish anything that you did. But also sort of knowing how emotionally raw this is going to be, how difficult and challenging this can be. I also don't want you, at least for the short term, to make any drastic decisions, right? Like, don't decide about relocating. Don't immediately jump into a new job unless you were looking at it before. Because there's just some of those things where just any change, any stability, it's going to be like oxygen to a drowning person, right? Like, you're just going to want to jump at it because it's going to make you feel better. But what you want to be able to do is to make sure that it is good in the long term. And so again, any of those big pivots or things like that are going to become problematic. Now, as we sort of talk about your friends and the people around you, maybe this isn't going to be true for you, but the two times that it happened to me, everybody around me got real weird. And what I meant was either one, they didn't know what to say. They knew that it was hard. Maybe they knew that it wasn't fair. And so their response was no response. I didn't hear from them. They stayed away and they sort of didn't talk until everything went back to quote unquote normal again. And then they all showed back up again. And so look, I get it. It's difficult. That's one option. I think you're going to get some people who are going to sort of treat you like you suddenly have a terminal illness, right? Like it's going to be, are you okay? Is everything all right? And you're going to just have to relive the story of what happened over and over and over again as they all sort of want to talk about only that. Even if you are trying to move on and trying to do other things, they're going to keep wanting to do that. Fine, we'll get about how to handle that in a second. But then I think the other group of people that you're hopefully going to find are the ones who are like, look, what do we do? How do we move forward? What can we do to support you? Those are the people you want to hold on to with both hands because they're rare. And I think that those are the people that are going to help you get through this. But like I said, just sort of understand that people are not going to know how to react to this. And so I think to that end, the next part of it is, look, you're going to need to have an answer ready. Because in a moment, whenever it probably shouldn't be that way, you maybe have to make everybody else okay more than you probably want to. And so for me, having the answer ready is just simply saying, look, what are you going to tell people? How do you be able to tell them what happened? And what I would tell you to do is just the more honest, the better. I know it's going to be easy to just sort of gloss it over, say everything was fine. It's not that big of a deal. But again, I think, your support system can only support what they know is a problem. And so for me, the more honest you're able to say about what really happened, are you okay? Are you not okay? Those sort of things, you're going to be able to find out where you're going to find some of that help and where you're not. But a lot of this also is the ability to try to get through the short-term pain to get to a longer-term view. Step back and think about the big picture of everything you accomplished. Step back and think about, what you went through and to be able to see it for the positive that it was. But also understand that the big picture is what we need to look at here about how do we move forward. Because like I said, you don't just want the emotional reaction. We want to be able to think a little bit longer term. And we're going to get into that more in a second when we get to some of the more practical advice. Now, the last thing I don't want you to do is to set a time frame. And the thing is that I fully realize emotions and time frames rarely coexist well together. They are two things that one is just about being human and it's personal. And with that sort of stuff, it doesn't lend itself well to suddenly saying, okay, great, this is what we need to do. And we're going to do it in this amount of time. But here's why I say this and here's why it's important. I think you need to give yourself time to be angry, to let it hurt, to be frustrated, to sort of, again, the 7 stages of grieving and all that sort of stuff. I think that very much applies here. It's a big life change. But the thing is that I see a few too many people, and I think I've been trapped by this too, where you don't want to become trapped or imprisoned by the pain, by the frustration, by those things, and just sort of let them dominate you. Because what you want to be able to do is to give it time, to be able to process it, to work through it, to get to a place where you're okay saying, okay, look, this is what I went through, but we need to move on. And for me, the ability to set a time frame of days, weeks, whatever that was, to say, okay, look, I'm going to give myself this amount of time to work through this. And whenever we get to the end of this, I need to move past it. I need to start moving on to the next thing. Because by sort of having that out there, it gave me a framework and a time to be able to work through, to process, to say, okay, look, what's going on here? When am I going to get through this? And as I got closer to the end of it, what I was allowed myself to do is to be able to start to sort of put it to bed, put it behind me. And I think that for me, the ability to do that, to be able to say, okay, look, there's a period when we're going to, again, really sort of live in that, whatever that is. But again, at some point, we want to move on. Because I think that's the important part of this is how do we start to move on to the next thing and not let this poison the well, not let make us become bitter, not make it get in the way of finding the next thing or becoming hard to hire or doing those sort of things because I'm still so stuck on what happened. Now, that's the emotional part of it. So let's take a second and now move on to talk about what can we do on the practical side of things. Now, the practical side is going to be just that. What are the sorts of things that we need to do to get you ready to get back out there and to get you back into whatever it is you want to do? Now, the thing with this is that I see a lot of people most of the time just say, well, okay, look, what I want to focus on is just getting a new job. Well, I think the reason that this becomes a little bit tricky is that whenever we think about it, jobs don't happen quickly. There's an application process, there's an interview process, there's a vetting process, there's a negotiation process. There's a lot that goes on. And that it doesn't happen quickly. And also, the thing that I have with that that's a little bit problematic is you're also basically putting all your eggs in one basket. You're saying, okay, look, I'm going to go after this one thing. The challenge is, what happens if that one thing doesn't work, takes too long, or again, it doesn't turn out to what you want it to be? And so what I want to do is encourage you to sort of play a short game, a medium game, and a long game. And now how you prioritize these is going to be up to you because there's just going to be some realities. Look, I'm sitting here talking to a camera in my studio, right? Like, I don't know what your personal situation is. I don't know what you're dealing with. But here's the thing, is that depending on, did you get severance? Do you have savings? How big are your bills? A lot of sort of variables that are really much about more the real life aspect of this are going to dictate how quickly do you need income? How quickly do you want to sort of reorder these sort of steps to get into a place where you can at least find some stability while you try to find the long-term solution? And like I said, I've been in places hell, I've lived in an apartment for a month with no lights out because I just couldn't figure out how to pay the damn bills. So again, trust me, I've been there and understanding, how that can go. And it's not about being judgmental, or it's not about saying you should have done better. It is what it is. I think at this point, how we got here isn't really kind of the important thing to dwell on. It's where we go from here that's important. Now, I think that with this, let's start with the short game. And the short part of this should take days to weeks at most. These are the things that we're going to need to do quickly to give you the best chance of sort of getting that next job, moving on, doing whatever that thing is. And the thing that I want to say here is, I think it's important to not jump in right away. Partially because of the emotional things that we talked about before. I just think you need a little bit of time to get your head right. But often, most people do not see this coming. So there are just some basic things that you need to do to put your best foot forward when you start going back out on the hunt again. And I think the first part of that is to know your brand. If you haven't listened to episode 6 through 9 of the podcast, I'll put a link down in the description so you can go and find those, but it is really clear about how do you get clear about building your brand. Now, whenever I use the word brand, I'm not talking about a logo. I'm not talking about a typeface. I'm not talking about a color. What I'm talking about is, who are you? What makes you different? How are you going to stand out from the crowd? This is a moment where it is going to be real tempting to be generic, to try to appeal to everyone. You need to fight that instinct, because blending in and being like everybody else, this is not the moment to do that. This is the moment to say, this is what I'm good at. This is how I stand out. Again, you want to be memorable. And I think that's going to be really important. But that's why understanding your brand is really important. Also, because when you go into that new job, to be able to say, this is who I am, this is what I'm about, this is what I'm good at, will get you acclimated much quicker. Will get your boss to understand who you are much quicker. And again, I think that ability of just sort of going and saying, hey, I'll be whoever it is you want me to be, that never works out well. And so I think, to be able to get that clear, once you have it clear, update everything. This is your new job. You need to be spending 5, 6, 8 hours a day updating your resume, update your LinkedIn, update your portfolio, be able to make sure that all these things are looking their best, because these are your first introduction. These are the things that are out there working 24 hours a day when you're sleeping. And so this needs to be the best introduction possible. And I see too many people. It's like, look, I've said this in other videos. You're not where you worked. You're not where you went to school. You need to be able to really think about this stuff and put in the time. If it's hard, ask somebody to help you. If you're a designer and not a writer, great. Design the writer's portfolio and have them write your portfolio. Do something so that you're putting really good content out there. Update everything. The other thing is to start spreading the news. Because the weird part of this, I guess, is that you now have the ability to look loud. Meaning that if you're in a job and trying to change to another one, you can't really let your company know what's going on or that you want to leave. You are not encumbered by that problem now, right? Again, whenever you're doing this, tell people you are looking for new opportunities to be able to do that sort of thing. Put it in your social media channels so people are aware. But whenever you do that, I think a lot of people fall into another trap here. And they'll sort of go out and they'll tell me like, oh yeah, no, I'm searching and it went really well today. I got 100 new connections on LinkedIn. Who cares? Just honestly, who cares? I have, I don't know what, tens of thousands, like 10 or 15,000 connections on LinkedIn. Those are like trading cards, right? Like, yes, it's a connection. It isn't really going to help you find that new job. Relationships are what are going to help you find that new job. If the connection leads to a real conversation, if the connection leads to you building a relationship with somebody, great, that is on the right track. But to be able to think that you went out and just got a bunch of random connections and that's somehow moving your career forward is not the case. Because that's the thing that matters in this industry, are the relationships you have. A digital network, and like I said, just being connected to somebody doesn't mean much. It means that maybe you can message them at most. But that's the thing you need to concentrate on and to be able to get ready for, is to build relationships. That's what a network really is. Not a bunch of phantom empty connections. It's about real relationships. Now, from there, let's start to talk about medium-term things. And these are going to take weeks to months. And with all of that set, the first thing I want you to do is to start reaching out to people, because just like we just said, if this is about relationships, this is what is going to become important. Reach out to people you want to work with, to teams you want to work for, companies, recruiters, HR people, whatever that is, because here's the thing. I am much more likely to hire somebody who has a passion for my brand and my company than some random person who applies through LinkedIn or Indeed or our website. I want to see passion. I want to see investment. I want to see those sort of things. So again, don't just carpet bomb and do everybody. Pick the ones that you really feel like you have something to offer. And again, start reaching out to them to see what they have. Even if it doesn't happen right now, I can't tell you the number of people whenever I didn't have something right now, but I had something come free in a month or two. That is going to be so much more important. But the other part of it is to start applying to those jobs. Now, this is going to be humiliating, frustrating, and this will be like carpet bombing because every 20 or 30 you apply to, maybe you get one rejection letter. It is broken and insane, but I just can't fix that right at this moment. But that's the other thing is you need to be able to start to go out there, start applying to those things. But again, things that you are good at, things that you want, that again would be a long-term job, not just saying, okay, well, that looks like maybe the right set of keywords. But the other thing to start doing in this term is, again, we're laying the foundation for those jobs, which is really the longer-term goal here. But the other part of this is to start to think about, is there freelance work? Is there some way you can get medium-term income to come in, whether it's from friends or businesses in your area? The great part about all this technology, you can work from anywhere and be incredibly effective. But that ability to start to say, hey, can I start to take those skills and to be able to start to work on them in some way? Again, you can go to Aquint or to other companies like that I've done in the past when I've been in this situation to be able to get contract work from different companies. Really viable way of working at that. But also, like, go out and talk to recruiters. And here's the thing I'll tell you. There are really good recruiters and there are really bad recruiters. And when they're interviewing you, you interview them. Ask them how many people they place. What percentage is that of the total pool they have available? How many jobs do they think about right now that they think you would be really good for? If you're just going to be another number and another statistic that they don't care about and they're just going to file you into the database, you're probably going to do a lot of work that's going to go nowhere. And again, I think do it just so you have that as an option. But again, the people who care, they're easy to spot. They are so easy to spot. And again, just keep going out and talking to those people until you find them. And then lastly, we have the longer term things. And longer term is going to be just what I said. This is going to be months. And this is going to be able to take a while. And the reason why I just want to sort of position this way is if you think, oh, I'm going to go out and get a job in 2 weeks and it doesn't happen, you're going to get frustrated. You're going to feel like maybe you're letting yourself down. You're letting your family down. Like you're going to start to have a disproportionate reaction to the reality of what this is going to be. And so I think if you're able to tell everybody and tell yourself that this is going to take weeks, if not months to be able to do, then again, you're able to plan and you're able to have realistic conversations about how do we get from here to there. But I think this is going to be the two things is, like I said, you need to be able to go out and to be able to start really getting that job. That's what the long-term goal here is. Or the other thing is, even if you decided, hey, look, I want to go out on my own. I want to become a full-time freelancer. I want to start my own business and do things like that. You need to write a business plan. You need to look at funding. Again, this is not something that's going to happen overnight. And you need to make sure that this is something you are really able to commit to because I've seen so many people getting put in this situation. And it's like, oh, they want a full-time job. And then they want to be a freelancer. And then they want to start their own company. I don't know who I'm hiring. Again, if I start to interview that person, are you serious about this full-time job? Or are you just, is this an option to you see if your freelance work or your own thing works? Or because again, I start to question your motivation because it seems like you're all over the place. And again, that sort of panic can bleed through. And even if you'd be great for a job, you might not actually get it because you've created so much concern and doubt that people just aren't sure what to do. And we don't want that. So now let's talk about, I think there's a resource, especially in the design space, that I think could really help for that. So let's talk about resourcing next. So I think, look, there's a lot of obvious resources out there. So go to the LinkedIn, go to the Indeeds, go to Behance. Like, again, there's a lot of those sites. Go look at all of them. But the one that I think that sort of stands out and the one that I've been supporting is called the Amazing Design People List. And the reason why this is a site that I've been supporting is because I think it does a few important things. One is that if you are looking for work, you can get listed. So it is obvious that you're looking for work. Two, companies who need people can go and list the jobs there. And I think just even that alone tends to set itself apart. But the third part of this is that if you want to go get a one-time portfolio resume review by an amazing group of mentors, you can do that. I've been signed up to be a mentor. I've got a lot of the people who I really work with and admire, from big global recruiters to heads of design, all sorts of different people who are there. So you can go and be able to really get feedback, because that's the missing piece in all this that's so broken. When you don't get a job, when you don't hear back, you don't know why. And again, I think it's trying to be able to get that stuff fixed that's going to be important. But lastly, just sort of one closing thought. And I'd said this in the intro about how I think there can be a silver lining to all this. And the silver lining that I think can be in this is that I still remember being laid off the first time. I remember the conference room. I remember walking in and seeing the head of our division there, my boss, the HR person, all sitting there with the paperwork in the middle of the table. And it just dawned on me in that moment what was about to happen. And it's a feeling that I never forgot because I was unprepared. My resume and my portfolio were a mess. My network was nowhere. My brand was nowhere. I had no idea what any of that sort of stuff was. And I was so financially insecure. I was so unstable. I was so lost. And for me, I think it was one of those things of obviously have gotten through it, have moved on, have found some success in spite of it. But I think a big reason why I found that success was because I never forgot that feeling. And I made a promise to myself that I would never feel it again, at least when it came to work, right? And so I think for me, it was being able to take this moment, take this pain, take this frustration, take this problem, and turn it into something positive, turn it into something that fueled the rest of my career. And I think so much of what I have done, even to today, the podcast, making this video, is still trying to run from that moment. It's still trying to make sure that I don't ever go back to that moment again, and that I have the stability, I have the means, I have the brand, I have the network, that even if that does happen, if I get, as soon as I am done recording this, even if I get laid off then, I have the means to recover quickly. I have the ability to be able to survive it. I have the network and those connections so that, again, I'm not starting from zero. And I think that's the thing for me that becomes important in all of this. Don't become imprisoned by it. Don't let it become a trap for you. But also don't ever forget, because I think as people, we're sort of wired to take difficult situations and just sort of put them in the rear view and let them fade. But I think if you sort of use this as fuel to be able to drive you, to drive your standard, to drive your work, to drive your career, to find focus, to find your brand, to find your voice, then it's a moment that in the short term is going to be a real pain in the ass, and it's going to be a real tough thing to get through. But longer term can fuel and turn into something that can change your career. So hopefully this was helpful. Like I said before, if it was, I'd appreciate it. Hit the subscribe button because I'm going to be doing more videos like this. If you need help, go sign up for the Amazing Design People list. Like, again, reach out to me as a mentor. I'm happy to review portfolios. I'm happy to give whatever advice I can. Again, I have to put limits on it. It's a big world out there. A lot of people need help, but I'm happy to do whatever it is I can. And hopefully, I think with all of this and with some of this perspective, you can come out of this stronger and to be able to find a good way through it. So go out there, try to work on this stuff. Again, sort of lean into it and find that way forward. Be honest with yourself. And as always, stay crazy.